As I've gotten older, I've realized I still appreciate the winter in the same way I did as a kid. If you don't live in a cold climate, you'll never understand the allure of a mountain of snow that erupts overnight in the corner of a parking lot once it gets shoveled out, and the ensuing battle with all the other kids for dominion over said mountain. You'll never understand lining up with all your friends and building up as much speed as you can to glide over a slippery, frozen over portion of the playground, trying to outdo each other with spins and dance moves while trying to keep your balance and not crack your head open. And you'll certainly never understand the simple pleasure of building a snow fort, spending hours and days perfecting a hideout that by its very nature cannot last, an ephemeral monument to imagination and the cleansing powers of physical labor. And as an adult, for me at least, I basically get to still be a kid in the wintertime. Fall is unbelievably busy for me and I usually only get a few single days off between the middle of August and the beginning of December, so winter serves as a very important niche for me. It's the period of the year I get to relax. Living in a city is maybe not the greatest environment to experience this niche.
It's a sidewalk.
But, you know, what are you gonna do? We're all beholden to our relationships and our responsibilities. I gotta pay rent. Would be cool if those responsibilities involved building a sick-ass snow fort, but maybe it's not in the cards as much anymore. The novelty of winter might fade by February while the low temperatures remain, but goddamn is it ever fun for that first little while. This video isn't actually about winter though, it's about Monster Rancher. And it's about Monster Rancher's version of my version of winter. It's a video about a big-ass dog. Baku is a peculiar monster, almost specifically because it is not. In the original Monster Rancher 2 instruction manual, it has short profiles on a few monsters. It has snippets about all the monsters you would expect, and also, like, Baku is there. Nighton too. It is never explained how to unlock Nighton, but my favorite little guy just shows up when you unlock Undine. But this is a tangent, let's get back to it. Baku is a monster interesting enough that they decided to give him a shout out, only to call him nondescript, which is actually right on the lack of a nose if you think about it. Describing Baku is kind of difficult, but describing Baku isn't difficult because it's complicated. Describing Baku is difficult because it's very, very simple. It's a large dog. He's like rectangular, he's like a beige color, jowls like a pit bull or like almost like a hippo. He's a big boy, he's got big floppy ears, and he's got long legs with like big paws like a baby lab. He's got a big floppy tail too. I like the perspective on the legs.
Kinda, mine's better. Ew, that's not a dog.
It's kind of a dog. And then on top of all of this, they went and gave him the name Baku, which obviously was done with a purpose, I would assume, since Baku is a pre-established mythical little guy. A Baku is a tapir known to eat people's dreams. You might know Bakus through osmosis, even if you don't know them by name. They're the basis for Drowsy and Hypno from Pokemon. Baku neither eats people's dreams or is even remotely tapir-like, so I don't know what's going on here. He can take a nap. That's one of the things he can do. Is that the connection? Either way, Baku is a very strong contender for the most perplexing name award, which is saying something in a franchise that also calls the wolf tiger. Baku's a big lumbering boy with big lumbering stats. Casually, Baku can be a bit of a struggle due to a lack of accurate text being paired with a horrendous skill gain. It can be a bit frustrating to miss almost all of your text, but if you really lean into what he's good at, you're able to give yourself plenty of chances to win off a one hit. Statistically, he's very similar to Zilla, trading a small bump to skill in exchange for less speed. Baku does not appear at first glance to be unique in any particular way, but he definitely is, because Baku fills a niche in Monster Rancher 2 competitive play better than any other, and we'll get to that in a second. But first we gotta talk about his techs. Baku has a slow guts rate, though it's not as detrimental as some of his tanky cohorts. Because of this, he's got decent basic techs, though not to the level of something like Ape or Arrowhead. Dust Cloud is a solid tech given its role as a dedicated round ender once they're low on life. Decent hit percent and damage for 10 guts, but it's probably not going to be particularly impactful. Above curve, but you know, not enough on its own. Charge's numbers look good as long as you don't compare it to something like Arrowhead's Claw Assault. 5 sharpness for -5 hit is not really a great trade, but it at least gives the move a bit of personality, if not utility. Just like the dog himself, Baku's non-basic techs are also peculiar. Hit techs are techs explicitly designed to have high accuracy at the cost of pretty much everything else, which makes Bite a hit tech in name only. Bite has the dubious honor of being the least accurate hit tech in the entire game, tied with Golem Slap. Thankfully though, just like Golem Slap, the low accuracy ends up being offset pretty hard by the innate bonuses that come with the slower guts rate. Bite is like an amped up basic tech with a little bit of withering. 2 bites cranks up the numbers on everything pretty significantly. Way more damage and way more accuracy. This works as an actual hit tech for when you want to spend a little bit more on consistency, and this ends up being Baku's most accurate tech. But somewhere along the way, this chain takes a detour. 3 bites loses 12 hit percent from 2 bites, which, while obviously not very accurate at -5, is still actually in the upper half of Baku's techs accuracy-wise. 33 Force and Withering for 33 Guts is not bad at all, but the problem with this tech is that it's a bit of a catch-22. A catch-33. You want to use it at a Guts advantage, but having a Guts advantage can make the Withering a lot less valuable. Gust Breath is Baku's final hit tech, and it follows a long tradition of accurate slot 4 openers that are numerically pretty good, but definitely not what you want to swing first in a match. It has great damage and accuracy for its cost, but Baku does not want to be down 19 Guts on frame 1 even if it hits. Because of this, it can be a bit risky in AI vs AI, despite the overall usefulness and consistency. Inside the arena, Baku is one of the absolute biggest monsters in the entire game, so it means in many matchups, he starts in slot 3. So in fights like that, Gust Breath becomes more powerful, but that's really hard to plan for. Tongue Slap is a huge bomb for players willing to risk it all at -14. Outside of hit percent, it's got incredible numbers though, and it ends up being kinda comparable to Dragon's Trample, which is one of the best nukes in the entire game, though it's not quite at that same damage level. And despite that awful intelligence stat, Baku has a ton of int techs. Roar is pretty good for a cheap sharp tech. You're still hoping for a crit to really make it worth it, but it's on the same curve as Bite, so if you're running Intelligence Baku, this is your go-to for chip damage. 2 Roars is not nearly as good. A big drop in accuracy with everything else staying relatively the same means that you're now in gambling mode. But Baku definitely has better options to gamble on, so outside of niche scenarios where you only have enough guts to use 2 Roars and 1 second left on the clock, and regular Roar is not going to do enough damage, it's not particularly useful. In the same way that 3 bites loses hit percent as the final tech in a chain of hit techs, Million Roars loses sharpness over 2 bites. This has got big damage, withering, and sharpness. It's Baku's biggest nuke on the intelligence side, which is unfortunate considering if damage is what you're after, you should probably just have picked up Tongue Slap instead. Why are you building Intelligence Baku? Hypnotism is a low damage withering tech in slot 4, meaning Baku has the potential to open with it, which means it has the potential to put Baku into a hole immediately after round start. 21 is a pretty hefty chunk to pay for this, but with the bad-natured stress bonus, you're sitting at almost 50% chance to crit, so as long as you can hit and crit, you're in good shape. Sneeze is inaccurate for what it is, but the damage and withering are honestly not too bad for the cost. The issue is that at 16 guts rate, withering potentially 29 for a 20 cost move is not an incredible proposition. This isn't really what Baku wants to be spending its guts on. Mating Song is more of the same. More all-in than Sneeze, but barely more force means you're picking this specifically to ruin the day of other slow guts rate monsters, though the 33 withering means it's one of the rare withering techs that can potentially actually wither for less than its cost. Losing 30-ish guts is never fun as the target, but in this scenario, they're probably going to be fine. Foul Wind is a million roars that swaps damage and withering. Same old song and dance here, unfortunately, as his withering techs, but at least you're given a lot of different options considering how few techs Baku has overall. Baku's final intelligence tech is Nap. Healing techs are universally bad, and this is no different. In the hands of a human player, it's a bit better because you can pick your spots for it, and like all other healing techs, the amount it actually scales with intelligence is negligible, which means it's ostensibly usable in power builds. That said though, in a number of scenarios and probabilities that approaches roughly 100%, you're better off just doing damage instead of trying to heal in Monster Rancher 2. But now we come to Baku's niche. There's something about Baku that makes it singularly unique in Monster Rancher 2, and even more so in competitive play. Its best tech tends to damage Baku itself far more than its opponent. Baku's Diving Press is an anomaly of a tech, even among the field of recoil techs, which themselves are already pretty wild. Diving Press is just an unbelievable amount of value for 30 guts. Of course, you need to be able to stomach the potential recoil on a miss, but it's one of the absolute best round opening and desperation attacks in the game. Sure, it's ultra inaccurate, but the insane 60 force and big withering means on a round open, it's enough to instantly win the game on a hit. Because of the slow guts rate, you're probably hovering around 40% chance to land, which again is obviously not reliable on its own, but a 40% chance to instantly win on round open? Honestly, the numbers aren't too bad. And it's not like you lose anything on a miss. I mean, except for life. You lose a lot of life, potentially. Diving Press does a random amount of damage between 1 and whatever Baku attacking itself with a 20 force tech would accomplish, meaning higher defense does actually lower the potential recoil damage, though you're probably not running Baku as a tank. There are some other good recoil techs in the game, but no other monster has an instantly game-ending tech like this as their best overall. Icebergy, the Tiger mix is the best Baku most of the time, and 13 Guts rate is exactly average, so you're not really able to lean on its subbreeds to avoid being weak to Withering or run an effective tank build. Speed suits Baku best, which tends to be the case for all the big boys, even if that does not compute in your brain. If you're really focused on diving press above all else, you can go with a slower Guts rate Baku to give him a small boost to the accuracy, but Guts regen is still probably the most important thing to consider when comparing subbreeds. For builds most people pick up, well, diving press, and then 1 or 2 more techs based on their needs, and that's about it. Slot 1 is oversaturated with techs, but you got a few good options. You can really pick up any and all of the bite line and tongue slap as well. Though some players really appreciate being able to just access cheap stuff in slot 1 like the first bite and dust cloud instead of doubling up on big damage. Gust Breath is fine, but it's really reliant on matchup. If you know you're not going to start in slot 4, it becomes decidedly more valuable. Baku's intelligence build is a super gimmicky minefield of weak options with no way to cover up slot 1, and it's going to be inconsistent at the very best. Roar and Million Roars are his best techs here, so that's probably the bare minimum of what you need. Definitely fun to try and run Lockout with the Withering techs and Foul Gas, but it's missing some firepower. Baku comes in at the lower end of mid tier. Its best options by design are super risky, but unlike something akin to Mochi or Mach who sort of have the same game plan of just swinging big techs and praying, he's also got actual usable techs in slot 1 to help with a much bigger array of opponents. The numbers are there, and Baku is solid, but unfortunately the big doggy is by no means at the same level as something like Golem. The threat of diving press is enough to stop it from ever being completely counted out, but that's just not good enough to be a consistent threat. While raising a competitive Baku may have you feeling like the novelty has worn off after it misses a diving press for the 90th time, the same way the snowbanks really don't have the same effect in February as they did in December.
Oh, this sucks.
It's undeniably a cool-ass way to build a monster. And it's won tournaments before, so maybe you're just simply not lucky enough. You ever thought about that? You haven't been given the mandate of heaven and the blessings from on high necessary to let the big guy find his target. Do better. You're failing this good boy. Hey guys, video's unbelievably late, I am so sorry. Like I said off the top, I expected this to be a very slow time of the year for me, it always is. And February is normally God, I think last year I worked 12 hours throughout the entirety of February. So I'm sorry, I hope you guys have been enjoying the Nuzlocke episodes, they've been super fun to put together. We still got more coming, we're only about halfway through it at this point. But yeah, I'm hoping 3 times Pimpy does well. This won't even be edited in time. And as I'm saying this, I now realize the tournament's gonna happen long before I've even put together graphics for this part of the video. You know, hopefully there's no hard feelings and I don't lose in the worst way possible. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine. It's okay. This is all fine. I appreciate the support, I appreciate the patience. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.